Hi students, I am Shajmin. I welcome you all to yet another biology class conducted by Manorama Horizon. Today we are going to cover the chapter tissues. So now let's begin. What can you infer from this image? Here we can see that a man is placing a brick and it leads to the construction of a wall. So one brick each leads to the construction of a wall. Now what does this wall do? This wall helps in protection, provides protection. Now similarly, if you just look at this image, you can see that each cells leads to form, each cells group together and form tissues. Okay, so tissues are the group of cells having similar origin. As we have seen that each brick placed one after the other forms a wall. Similarly, tissues are formed by placing each cell one beside the other. So, a group of cells having similar origin. Another important thing is these cells have similar origin. So, these cells have similar origin. Now, what is the function? As we have seen, the wall provides protection. Similarly, here a tissue perform a particular function. Based on the type of tissue, they perform particular functions. So, now let's see the types of tissues. Here you can see that tissues are basically divided into two. They are of two types. One is plant tissues and the other one is animal tissues. Okay. Now let's begin with plant tissues. We'll study what are plant tissues, what are the different types of plant tissues. So first let's begin with plant tissues. Plant tissues are the tissues that are found in plants. Okay, these tissues are known as plant tissues. So first let's see the different types of plant tissues. So plant tissues, if you just see, basically plant tissues are divided into two. One is meristematic tissues. Okay, one is meristematic tissues and the other one is permanent tissues. So plant tissues are divided into two, meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. We'll begin with meristematic tissues. Okay, meristematic tissues. Now meristematic tissues are seen in growing parts of the plant. Wherever we see that there is growth in plant, those regions are covered with meristematic tissues. Now usually what happens, the growth is seen in the tip region. Okay, the height of the plant increases, as well as the growth is seen in the width region, okay, lateral region, which will leads to the increase in the diameter of the plant. So meristem is divided into three. One is apical meristem, which is seen in the tips. Okay, so either in the shoot tip or in the root tip, and this helps in the elongation of shoot or root. Another meristem is lateral meristem. Lateral meristem, you can see here, it is seen on the lateral side of the stem. So lateral side of the stem, this helps to increase the girth of the stem. So because of this lateral meristem, the girth of the stem slowly increases. Okay. Now next, the third type of meristem is the intercalary meristem. Intercalary meristem is seen between nodes. Okay, it is seen between nodes and it helps to increase the nodal length. They are known as intercalary meristem. So these are the different types of meristem. Now let's see what type of cells are seen in this meristem. So you can see here the cells which are found in the meristems have thin cell walls. Okay, they have thin cell wall, they have a prominent nucleus and there's no vacuoles. These cells lack vacuoles. Okay. Now the next type is the permanent tissues. Now coming to permanent tissues are divided into two. They are simple permanent and complex permanent. Okay, so there are simple permanent and complex permanent. So first we'll deal with simple permanent and then we'll move on to the complex permanent tissues. So the first simple permanent tissues is parenchyma tissue. Parenchyma tissues, if you look at the cells here, they have very thin walled cells. Okay, the cells are very thin walled. The cells are not very tightly packed. Okay, they are very loosely packed. You can see here air spaces can be seen. So this shows that the cells are not tightly packed. They are very loosely packed. They are thin walled. Okay, they are seen in very tender parts of the plant, like leaves or young stems. Okay, these parts will find the parenchyma tissues. Now let's see the characteristics of parenchyma tissues. So here you can see they are thin wall cell. As I already mentioned, they are thin wall cell. Next thing, they are isodiametric. Isodiametric means roughly circular. They are roughly circular and they are living. These are not dead cells. We will be seeing permanent tissues. There are some permanent tissues which are made up of dead cells. Okay, but these parenchymatous permanent tissues are made up of living cells. Next, the function. Now, what is the function? They have lot of chlorophyll in them. Some of the parenchyma tissues have lot of chlorophyll in them, hence they undergo photosynthesis. Apart from that, their major function is storage. They store whatever food is being prepared by the plant is stored in this parenchymatous tissues. And then in water plants, that is aquatic plants, there are a lot of air spaces in between parenchymatous tissues which help this aquatic plants in floating. Hence, they provide buoyancy. So, this was about parenchymatous tissues. Now, we'll move on to the next permanent tissue, simple permanent tissue, that is collenchyma. Now, if you just see, the major difference between a parenchyma and a collenchyma is the wall thickening. So, collenchyma, if you just see, these are the cells of collenchyma. Okay. Now, the wall thickening is seen in the corners of the cell. So, this is the corner. So, in the corner, you will be finding wall thickening. So, wall thickening is seen in the corner. Now, because of this wall thickening, the cells get attached to one another. Hence, if you try to remove one cell, it's not possible. Okay. So, this gives flexibility to the plant. Because of this character, the plant gets flexibility. So, when a heavy wind blows, the branches of the plant doesn't break because of the collenchyma. So, collenchyma provide flexibility to the plants. They are made up of living cells. Okay, this collenchymas are made up of living cell. Another thing, the walls are thickened at the corners. Not overall thickening is not seen. Irregular thickening is seen here. The walls are thickened only in the corner. Next thing what we'll see here is the function. I already mentioned what is the function here. The function is providing flexibility. So, whenever wind blows or any other stresses come, it prevent the plant or it prevent the branches from breaking. Now, let's move into the next simple permanent tissue, that is Sclerenchyma. Now, coming to Sclerenchyma, these tissues have thick cell wall. Because of the thick cell wall, there is no chances of conduction here. Hence, the cells here are dead cells. As I told you, there are many permanent tissues which are made up of dead cell. One of this is Sclerenchyma. Now, you can see here they are made up of dead cell. Now, as I told, they have thick cell wall. There is deposit of lignin, suberin deposits will be seen in the cell wall. Okay. So, they have thick cell wall with the deposits of lignin. Now, what is the function? Because they have thick cell wall, their major function is strength and support. Strength and support is the major function of this tissue. Now, next, so this was about the simple permanent tissues. Now, we'll move on to the complex permanent tissues. Complex permanent tissues, we also call them as vascular tissues. Okay. Now, can you just say me why we call it as vascular tissue? Okay, we call it as vascular tissue because they help in the conduction, okay, conduction of water, minerals, prepared food, okay. So, complex permanent tissues are also known as vascular tissues because they help in conduction. Now, coming to xylem, there are two complex permanent tissue, one is xylem and the other one is phloem. So, first let's say why they are called as complex permanent tissues. So, as I told you, tissues are made up of only one kind of cell, right? Here, complex permanent tissues are made up of different types of tissues, okay? You will be finding many different kinds of tissues coming together making one tissue xylem. So, hence this kind of tissue is known as complex tissue. Now, you can see here, as I told you that complex tissues has more than one tissues. So, here xylem consists of tracheids, vessels, parenchyma and fibers, okay. These tracheids, vessels, fibers are all elongated cells. You can see here the cells are elongated in these, okay. Now, the next thing, so mostly cells are elongated and dead, okay. Cells are elongated as well as dead. Fibers, they are dead cells, okay. Tracheids, they have dead cells. So, parenchymas are living, as we have already learned that parenchyma are living. They have very thick wall. Hence, no intercellular conduction is not possible in xylem. Hence, what happened? These cells are mostly dead. Now, what is the function of xylem? Xylem has many functions. The first important function we all know is conduction. As I told you while explaining what is meant by vascular tissue, there I have already mentioned that they help in conduction. So, xylem help in the conduction of water and minerals. Okay, it help in the conduction of water as well as mineral. Another function is storage of food. Because there is parenchyma here, xylem helps in the storage of food. Apart from that, because there are thick cell walls in the fibers of xylem or in the tracheids, they also provide strength. Okay, so these are the function of xylem. Now, let's move to the next vascular tissue or the next complex permanent tissue, that is phloem. Now, if you see phloem, same like xylem, it is made up of different types of tissues. Now, it consists of sieve cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, parenchyma and fibers. So, here companion cells have nucleus, they are living, they help the sieve tubes to function. Okay, sieve tubes helps in carrying food material, prepared food material from one part to the another. Now, you can see mostly here also the cells are elongated, living, okay, the cells are elongated and living, but fibers are not living, okay, sieve tubes are not living. Now, next function, what they do? They helps in the conduction of prepared food material. Whatever plants have prepared, the leaves, green parts of the plants have prepared, they helps in the transport. They helps in both direction transport, that is lower direction as well as upper direction, and they helps in the storage of food. As we can see, this parenchyma, so they help in the storage of food. So, this was about the different types of tissues in plants. Now, let's see the different types of tissues in animals. Tissues present in animals. As there are different types of tissues in plants, similarly, there are different types of tissues in animals. Now, let's see what are the different types of tissues in animals. First, in broadly we categorize, in plants there were only two types, that is meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. Later on, permanent got divided into simple and complex, and then simple again got divided into parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and complex got divided into xylem and phloem. Similarly, here in animals, if you see, there are four major types of tissues, okay, four major types of tissue. The first one is epithelial tissue. So, the first one what we will be studying is epithelial tissue. The next one is connective tissue. Okay, so the next one is connective tissue. Third is muscular tissue. Okay, the third type of animal tissue is muscular tissue, and the fourth and the last type is nervous tissue. So these are the 4 different types of animal tissue, and we'll be discussing each in detail. So let's move on to the first type of animal tissue, that is epithelial tissue. Now can you all guess where can you see this epithelial tissue? As we are dealing with animal tissues, we know that our body is also made up of animal tissues. Now try to guess where can you see this epithelial tissue. What is meant by epithelial? So just guess that. Okay, so here the term is like epithelium, we have heard it. Epidermis in plants we have heard. So here epi means upper, okay. So the top cover, outer cover, we call it as epi. You might have heard in biology epi, endo and all, okay. So epi means the outer. Now epithelial tissue, you might have understood when I told you about outer, you might have understood where it is seen. Okay, so majorly it is seen in skin, lining of internal organs, okay, small intestine, respiratory tract, digestive tract, kidneys, all the internal organ lining is by epithelial tissues, okay. Now, as I told you that in plants we have already learned that in permanent tissues they were simple, complex. Similarly, here also in animals, if it is epithelial tissues, you will be finding different types of epithelial tissues. So one is the squamous type. Now squamous type of epithelial tissues is like simple type, okay. They are made up of only one layer of flat cells, okay. They are made up of only one layer of flat cells. They are seen in the lining of internal organs such as small intestine and all, because absorption require thin layer of cells. Now stratified. Stratified is like thick layer of cell. You will be finding a thick layer. So not only one layer, you will be finding multiple layer, and they are seen in our skin. If you just hold your skin, you can see how thick it is. So this thickness is provided by stratified epithelial because they are made up of multiple layers. Apart from that, we have cuboidal. Cuboidal means they are of cube shape, okay. We all have played Ludo in our childhood, or even now we play, okay. Nowadays it's available online also. So cube shape, as the Ludo, when we play Ludo, we have this dice, right? Similarly, the shape of these cells will be like that dice. So this cuboidal shape, cuboidal cells, they help to provide the thickness, okay. Thickness they provide a mechanical support. It is usually seen in kidney providing a mechanical support. Then we have columnar cells. Columnar cells are cells which secretes, helps in secretion. Like in columnar cells, you will be finding a lot of glands also, okay. They helps in secretion. Even in columnar cell, you will be finding cilia. So what does cilia do? This cilia helps in the movement, okay, movement, because columnar cells mostly they take part in absorption and secretion. So this cilia helps in the movement of these substances, okay. So these are the different types of epithelial tissues. Now we have seen the different types of epithelial tissue. We'll see the function. Okay, so as I told you, the very first function, it is found all over the skin, right? Epithelial tissue is completely covered. The skin is made up of epithelial tissue. So it helps in providing protection. Apart from that, it helps in absorption, secretion and mechanical support. So these are the important function of epithelial tissues. Now next, we'll move on to the second type of tissue, that is connective tissue. Connective tissues are also of different types. Now from the term connective tissue, can you just tell me what will be the function of this tissue or where this tissue will be found? Okay, so by the name we can understand that connective tissue is a tissue which connects one part of the body to another. It connects one part of the body to another. So Here you can see there are different types of connective tissues. There are liquid connective tissues, rigid connective tissues, fluid connective tissues. There are different types, okay. So first let's see blood. Blood is a fluid connective tissue. Bone is a hard, rigid connective tissue. So there are fibrous connective tissues such as tendons, ligaments, okay. So types: blood, bones, cartilage, tendons, ligament, areolar tissues, adipose tissues, okay. Now blood, we know it's a liquid connective tissue. It helps in transport of many substances, okay, from one part of the body to another. So oxygen, if we require oxygen, it comes to the lungs, right? And what does blood do? Blood take this oxygen from the lungs to different parts of the body. So similarly, bones, what does bone do? Bone helps to connect one part to the other, okay. Now this you can see this bone of the arm, okay. So what does it do? It connects the elbow, okay, to the shoulder. Another thing is cartilage. Cartilage helps to reduce the friction between bones. So you just think that there are two bones here. So cartilage is seen in between the bones. It is seen in between the bone and it helps to reduce the friction between the bone. So when we bend, the bone doesn't become brittle and break, okay. Then we have tendons. Tendons helps to connect bone to the muscle, okay. So this is a bone. What does tendon do? Tendons are found near the bone and it connects bone to the muscle, okay. So bone to the muscle, tendon helps to connect. So it's very fibrous. Now the next thing is ligaments. Ligaments helps to connect two bones. As I have told you that between two bones there is cartilage. So here you will be finding cartilage and these two bones will be connected by a tissue and that tissue is known as ligament. Okay, ligament is a tissue which connect two bones and majorly they ask the question, what is the difference between ligament and tendon? Because students usually get confused with tendons and ligament because both are connecting one to the other. So in tendons what happened? Muscle get connected to the bone, and in ligaments what ligament does? Ligament connects bone to the bone, okay. Tendon connect muscle to the bone, ligament connect bone to the bone. Then we have areolar tissues. Areolar tissues are like filler tissues, okay. They are binding tissues. If there is skin layer and there is muscular layer, areolar tissues will be found here. They help in the binding, okay, binding of two different layers, okay. Then we have adipose tissues. Adipose, in short, fat tissues, okay. So they are fat tissues usually seen below the skin. They provide insulation to our body. So when it is very warm, it doesn't allow the heat to enter our body, and when it is very cold, it doesn't release the heat from the body, okay. So hence it acts as a insulator. Now I think you have understood the function. The connective tissues, what it does, it connects one part of the body to the other. Not only connecting, it does many function. As I told you, one after the other, how each connective tissues provide different functions. Now let's move on to the third animal tissue, that is muscular tissue. Now if you see here muscular tissue, in the screen you can see that three different types of muscular tissue. So one is the three different types of muscular tissue. One is the smooth, second is cardiac, and the third is skeletal. So types of muscular tissue: skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles, you will be finding these muscles attached to the bones, and these muscles work according to our will. Okay, if I want to raise my hand, it's because of the skeletal muscle. The next thing is smooth muscle. Smooth muscles are found in our internal organs, okay, and they are involuntary. They will not work according to our control. If I want some smooth muscle to stop working, they won't stop, okay. But if I want my skeletal muscle to work according to me, they'll work, okay, because they are voluntary in function, whereas smooth muscles are involuntary in function. Now coming to cardiac muscle, they are special branched muscle. You can see here, these two muscle, there is no branching in these two muscle. Whereas in the third type of muscle, you can see branches. So this muscle is a combination of smooth muscle as well as skeletal muscle. You will be finding striations, you will be finding branches will be there, that's a different thing, but you will be finding striations here, that's the characteristics of skeletal muscle. But it is involuntary, that's the characteristic of smooth muscle. Okay, so it shows the characteristics of both type of muscle. It is seen in heart. Okay, so hence this is a special muscle seen only in heart. Now, what is the function? What is the function of muscle? Muscles helps in movement in the body. Different types of movement in the body is done by muscles. Okay. Now, let us move to the last animal tissue, that is nervous tissues. Nervous tissues, the whole of the nervous tissue is made up of only one type of cell, and that cell we call it as nerve cell or neuron. Okay, you can call it as nerve cell. There's no difference between calling it as a nerve cell or a neuron, but the most used biological term is neuron. Okay, so it is made up of nerve cell or neuron. Now if you just see, look at a neuron is a long cell. We have studied in last chapter also that neurons are long cells in the human body. Now these neurons have some branch structure. These branch structures are known as dendrites. Okay, these branch structures are known as dendrites. So these dendrites receives the signal coming from some other neuron, and then they transfer it to a circular body which we call it as cell body. Okay, so cell body is the structure which receives the signal. Now from there it goes into the long tube which we call it as axon. So these are the major part of a neuron. So let's see the parts. Okay, the parts are dendrite, cell body and axon, the major part, and I have told you what are their function. Dendrites receive the signal from the previous neuron. Okay, it transfer it to the cell body. What does the cell body do? Cell body has the nucleus. Okay, cell body has the nucleus. They helps to amplify the signal, increase the intensity of the signal, and then axon, it transfer it to the long tubular structure. The cell body, after increasing the intensity of the signal, transfer it to the long tubular structure which we call it as axon, and axon takes this signal to the next dendrite. Okay, now what is the function? Now you can see here this nervous tissues composes the brain, spinal cord, everything. Okay, so hence they helps in controlling and coordinating all the function in our body. In our body, whatever function takes place, everything is controlled and coordinated by this nerve cells. This was about the different types of tissues. So we have studied that there are two different types of tissue. One is plant tissue and the other one is animal tissues. We have also studied that plant tissues are again divided into two types. One is meristematic tissue and the another one is permanent tissues. Permanent tissues are again divided into simple and complex. Simple permanent tissues we have seen Parenchyma, Collenchyma, Sclerenchyma, and in complex permanent tissues we have seen Xylem and Phloem. Now coming to animal tissues, we have seen four types of animal tissues. One is epithelial tissue, another one is connective tissues, then muscular tissues and nervous tissues. Now let's solve a few questions. So first question you can see, identify the plant tissue. So their function or some of the characteristic of the tissue is given and we have to identify which tissue they are talking about. Helps in buoyancy. So which tissue help in buoyancy? We have seen that there is a special kind of parenchyma which is seen in aquatic plants, and that parenchyma is known as Parenchyma. So it's a type of parenchyma because they have air spaces in between them, hence we call this parenchyma as parenchyma. Now, transport prepared food materials. Transport prepared food materials. So, which tissue help in the transport of food material? We have seen that the conduction of material takes place by vascular tissue, and also we have seen that conduction of water molecule take place by xylem, and conduction of prepared food take place by phloem. So, the answer will be phloem. Now, the next thing, helps to provide strength and support. So, it provides strength and support. So, here we can write two tissues here. One is the Sclerenchyma. So, the major function of Sclerenchyma is providing strength and support to the plant. Apart from that, xylem also provide strength and support to the plant. Now, we'll move on to the next question. Which among the following tissues is composed of dead cells? So, which among the following tissues? Here you can see three simple permanent tissues has been given. In that, which tissue contains dead cells? So, we know that it's Sclerenchyma, because Sclerenchyma has thick walls in them which prevent conduction of materials, hence they are composed of dead cells. Now, next, name the following liquid connective tissue. Liquid connective tissue, or we can say it as fluid connective tissue. So, which tissue is fluid connective tissue? It is blood. So, blood is the fluid connective tissue. Now, the next question is branched muscular cells. Branched muscular tissues are cardiac tissues. Okay. Cardiac muscle tissues are made up of branched muscular cells. Long tubular structure of neuron. Long tubular structure of neuron. So, long tubular structure of neuron is axon. We have just seen that structure. The long tubular structure which takes signal from the cell body and transfer it to the another neuron is axon. Next question is, which epithelial tissue is seen in the lining of small intestine? Now, we know that the small intestine helps in absorption. Absorption requires thin layer of cells. So, here squamous epithelial tissues helps in the lining of, is seen in the lining of small intestine. So, this was about the chapter tissues. To get more detailed videos about the chapter, to get live classes, to get access to the different question papers, question bank, you can subscribe to Manorama Horizon. Now, we'll meet in the next class taking a next chapter. Thank you.
Manorama Horizon. Learning made simple.